Bankruptcies of oil companies have begun in Russia. The Russian state bank VTB is initiating bankruptcy proceedings against the oil group First Oil. The debt owed to the bank is nearly 6 billion rubles. Experts note that the oil business has been affected by the tightening of American sanctions, which drove the price of Russian oil down to $40 per barrel and below, leading to a series of bankruptcies among small oil companies in Russia. According to Rosstat, half of the companies extracting oil and gas in the country are currently operating at a loss. Those companies that remain profitable have reduced their profits by more than 3 times. Another factor hitting Russian oil is the strikes by Ukrainian drones on refineries. Losses from these attacks have exceeded 1 trillion rubles. This was reported to Kommersant by Evgeny Borovikov, Deputy General Director of the insurance broker Mainj. According to Bloomberg's calculations, in 2025, Ukraine carried out 120 attacks on Russian oil facilities in the aggressor country. January was simply catastrophic for the Russian economy, says journalist Michael Naki.
January was not just a month when all the accumulated consequences began to show themselves. No, it became the month when the collapse began. The collapse of restaurants, factories, even state-owned enterprises where they stopped paying salaries. Everyone inside Russia is talking about this. From Patriots to analysts, RBC to war correspondents, they are all noting a disaster has begun and fear that the worst is still yet to come.
Consumer prices are rising much faster than official statistics claim, says State Duma Deputy Delyagin on the air of Echo of Moscow radio.
At the beginning of this year, I personally felt, quite a noticeable jump in prices. Yes, I said the same thing.
Russia is being hit by a wave of business defaults, writes the publication Moscow Times. Just last week, 10 companies defaulted. Among them are Moscow's Mosrezhinlift, the household chemicals manufacturer Clean Planet, and the online store Nappy Club. According to official data from the Bank of Russia, 11% of the total corporate loans had become problematic at the start of the year.
Well, next, let's talk about Russia and about Telegram. The Russian authorities have partially restricted the operation of Telegram. The messenger was actively used on the front lines. So now Russian military communication is disrupted, which we're certainly glad to see. Units of the Russian Federation previously used Starlink, but given the current situation, they've been forced to switch to Russian networks. However, even here, Discord is already unavailable, and now Telegram is under threat of being blocked as well. We'll talk in more detail about the ban on Telegram and the possible consequences of this for the Russian army with Alexander Demchenko, a consultant at the Comeback Alive Initiative Center. Mr. Alexander, welcome.
A warm greeting to everyone.
Mr. Alexander, so what do you see as the main consequences of restricting Telegram? How justified are these panic cries coming from the swamps, from their side?
Well, the thing is, this is already the second blow to the Russian invasion army in the past week. I mean in the information sphere in terms of their support. So the first is the blocking of Starlink for the Russian armed forces, and the second is Telegram. Telegram was really used primarily for this kind of horizontal interaction between Russian units on the front line. But it's also an important factor in propaganda. For example, a wide variety of so-called Z-War correspondents and Russian Telegram channels frequently and actively utilize this network, especially after other available messengers were completely restricted or blocked in Russia. Currently inside Russia itself, according to the latest information we receive, Telegram is still working, but it is experiencing significant slowdowns. Another thing is that Russian Telegram users themselves are saying that in the very near future, the entire situation may get much worse. This wave of blocking is just preparation for something bigger, a more massive shutdown of the internet in general across the Russian Federation. And the proof of this is the creation of so-called whitelists of websites. So to put it in relatively simple terms, when they eventually flip the centralized master switch for the entire internet across the Russian Federation, only certain specific sites from the approved whitelist remain accessible. For their daily communication, people are then forced to use this new messenger called Max that was created by the Russian authorities, a platform that is completely controlled and absolutely fundamentally unsafe for all users. And basically, the blocking of Telegram is specifically aimed at pushing this Max messenger as much as possible among the population.
Well, Kommersant wrote that in Russia, after Telegram, WhatsApp is also starting to become inaccessible, and YouTube might end up being blocked as well. Well, this really looks like some serious tightening of the screws, doesn't it?
The thing is, YouTube has actually been getting blocked for quite a while now. Back in 24, these measures to block and slow down YouTube and similar things started. Yeah, in 25, calls and video calls on WhatsApp were banned. Currently, WhatsApp is being blocked. There are already formal official statements from WhatsApp about this. The thing is, up until now, people living in Russia, and more importantly for us, users in the territories of Ukraine occupied by Russia were using VPN services to get access. Now, though, as experts say, this blocking uses sophisticated new technologies, and they're significantly more advanced than before. The reality of the situation is they're using artificial intelligence that meticulously monitors and tracks data packets, that is, specific requests from users' IP addresses, and anything that doesn't meet the set criteria for content considered safe by the Kremlin regime gets immediately and systematically blocked. So what we are looking at right now is a complex situation where throughout the course of this year, we will see the Kremlin exerting their absolute maximum efforts to create a total information blockade around itself.
And what about, the goal is pretty clear, but, there aren't exactly fools sitting over there either. Well, they must realize that this could provoke some kind of social upheaval. Or do they not think about that?
It seems to me that the regime in the Kremlin doesn't think in those terms at all. For them, there are two primary and significant threats: Ukraine and the free flow of information. They can't reach Ukraine thanks to the Ukrainian defense forces and the fighting on the front line. So they do what they can reach. That is, they block the internet, restrict access to information as much as possible within Russia and in the occupied territories, especially when it comes to setbacks on the front line, the negotiation process, or economic troubles within Russia. All this information spreads extremely quickly through social networks like Telegram and Telegram channels, and that's dangerous for them. So they're tightening the screws wherever they can reach.
Mr. Alexander, you'll agree this information blockade is happening against a backdrop of serious economic problems, including banking and developer crises. I read that there are two major developers in Russia who are right on the brink of crisis because they took out bank loans, and now no one is buying this housing since people simply don't have any money. There's also the drop in oil and gas revenues and rising prices. So this chain, information blockade, economic problems, it could turn into something concrete. Are these things connected or not?
Absolutely. The reality of the situation is just a very small handful of regions in Russia today, according to the statistics for 2025, are still demonstrating any significant economic growth. For example, that's the Kurgan region, Tatarstan. Those are the places with the highest orders for the Russian military-industrial complex. And two more additional regions are Kaliningrad, the Kaliningrad region, where they currently assemble Chinese cars from large imported kits. The thing is, other regions are showing a decline, and this growth dynamic that the Russian economy was demonstrating, thanks to investments in the military-industrial sector and payments to people sent to the so-called special military operation, that dynamic has decreased and is now showing a downturn. And of course, when people in different regions talk about how things are just as bad in their own region, and people in other regions of vast, truly vast Russia hear about it, especially through messengers, this becomes dangerous in terms of the overall situation with social tension. That's why the less communication there is between people, the greater the distance between regions, including informational distance, and the more cautious people are in these interactions, the more it benefits the Kremlin.
Mr. Alexander, one final question. Even Russian analysts and economists now write that by summer, the war-torn and sanctioned Russian economy could collapse. I know they have a strong buffer, so maybe summer is just an optimistic outlook. What are your predictions?
Look, the main sectors of the Russian economy that have shown growth in recent years are, in fact, the military-industrial complex, capital construction, and while there hasn't been growth, the oil and gas sector has continued to keep the economy afloat. The oil and gas sector, based on last year's results, so when measured against January 25th, has actually demonstrated almost a twofold decline, which is a total of 12% compared to December 25th. So you can no longer rely on it. You yourself mentioned the construction sector, which pulls along other industries and which is showing a decline. And the military-industrial complex is no longer delivering the same level of government orders and economic or production support for the Russian economy as it did before. I'm far from thinking that there will be some kind of collapse of the Russian economy.